Long before I joined the media, I used to work for a retail company. And I remember what the CEO of the retail company told me one day. He said, Gaurav, you know, there are three things that you need to watch out for in retail, and if you get these three things right, nothing will go wrong. I asked him what those three things were, and he said in retail it is number one, location, number two, location, and number three, location. Now you would be wondering why I'm talking about retail to you. Actually not. I'm talking about Pakistan. Hi, I'm Major Gaurav Arya and you're watching Checkmate. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan has exacted a very stiff geopolitical rent from the world for the past 75 years, ever since it came into being. From the day of its creation, Pakistan was part of the SEATO and CENTO alliances, spearheaded by the United States of America. And later on, Pakistan was part of the first war on terror, which happened very recently. And before that, Pakistan was also indirectly part of the first Afghan jihad. Now, Pakistan has played both sides of the table. Pakistan, at one point in time, was supporting the American CIA in getting even with the Russians. We all know the history that America has had with Russia and Vietnam. And obviously, that was at the peak of the Cold War. What Pakistan brought to the table was very simple. The Pakistani dictator Zia-ul-Haq said to the Americans that we know how you were humiliated in Vietnam by the Russians. We know how the Russians funded, trained and equipped the Viet Cong. We will do the same thing for you. For you, we will make Afghanistan Russia's Vietnam. Afghanistan was pumped in with billions of dollars in cash and weapons, giving rise to a culture which is known as the heroin and the Kalashnikov culture in Pakistan today. Well, Pakistan got its money. And what Pakistan did was it played to the gallery. Now, why would Pakistan be important as far as Afghanistan is concerned? That is because Pakistan shares a border with Afghanistan. And that is because Afghanistan is a landlocked country. There is another country that shares a border with Afghanistan. There is another country that has a seaport. There is another country that has far better infrastructure than even Pakistan. That country also has oil. It has gas. But that country, since 1979, has been under sanctions of almost all of the Western world. Yes, I'm talking about Iran. The downfall of Iran in the diplomatic circles after 1979 was a lottery for the state of Pakistan. And Pakistan used its geopolitical location, its strategic location in the world to make money. So much so that Pakistanis forgot how to genuinely make money. They forgot how to expand the tax net. They forgot how they should improve their exports. They forgot the basics of economics because there were three things in their minds always. Number one, we are so geopolitically and strategically important that we cannot be allowed to fail. We are the only Muslim country in the world with an atom bomb, and hence we cannot be allowed to fail. And heaven forbid, if those atom bombs were to fall, if the nuclear weapons were to fall in the hands of terrorists, it would be the world's worst nightmare. Hence, the Western world, especially America, would keep on pumping dollar after dollar. And billions of dollars would keep Pakistan afloat. Now, three things happened, my friends, by which this entire equation changed. And the geopolitical rent that Pakistan felt was its due has stopped coming into Pakistan. Number one, the United States of America exited from Afghanistan. On 15th of August last year, the Americans, following an agreement that they had with Taliban, which was signed in Doha, suddenly, without much warning, decided to exit Afghanistan. Now, once the Americans left Afghanistan, there was nothing for the Americans or for much of the Western world to do there. And suddenly, Pakistan's importance came down to zero. Suddenly, the United States of America said that they wanted to focus on the Indo-Pacific, they wanted to focus on China. And more recently, ever since the Russian-Ukraine war started, their focus was towards Russia. America brushed aside Afghanistan and Pakistan. That was point number one. Point number two, nobody is willing to believe Pakistan's nuclear threats any longer. When a Pakistani minister says, "Pau pau kilo ki bomb," which is 250 grams, he's alluding to smaller nuclear devices. Nobody takes the Pakistani threat of nuclear war seriously any longer. Point number three is how Pakistan sold the idea of the China-Pakistan economic corridor to this entire world. And they said that it is here that China is going to be stationed, it is here that jobs will be created, it is here that the future of the world's prosperity will unfold. None of that happened. For the past 3 years, the China-Pakistan economic corridor is a dead duck. You know, it's on ventilator, people are trying to revive it, but there isn't much hope. There are security concerns, there is massive corruption in Pakistan. And of course, Imran Khan's policy of publicly announcing what is wrong with China-Pakistan economic corridor, that particularly has not endeared him with the Chinese. Now, it looks that Imran Khan will come back to power. At least that is what the analysts are saying. Now, coming back to the point about geopolitical rent, about location. You know, Iran out of the factor since 1979. Iran's support of the Hezbollah, of the Hamas, of various terror outfits. Iran having boxed itself into a corner. Iran who regularly threatens nuclear war and annihilation of the Jewish race. Iran that says that America is the great Satan. That Iran is today on the brink of collapse. And I will tell you exactly what India is doing and how it is going to be detrimental to the interests of Pakistan. Pakistan, as I said before, depended too much on its geostrategic location, which today nobody is pretty much interested in. Now, this geopolitical location, the geostrategic location of Pakistan, gave Pakistan ideas of strategic depth. For example, Pakistan thought that it must have strategic depth inside Afghanistan. And how did it achieve that? The creation of the Taliban. One of the reasons behind the creation of Taliban, there were many, but one of the main reasons behind it were also the fact that Pakistan could claim strategic depth inside Afghanistan. They would have a friendly regime there. That friendly regime would ensure that anything which Pakistan thought was against the interest of Pakistan, especially vis-a-vis India, the Taliban would not allow that. And there were many suppositions on which Pakistan based its foreign policy of Afghanistan. That failed. Because ever since the Afghan Taliban have taken power in Kabul, more than 200 Pakistani soldiers have been killed by the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is pretty much the other side of the coin. There is no difference between the Afghan Taliban and the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. And lately, with Baluch rebels and Baluch freedom fighters joining the TTP, Pakistan is living through its worst nightmare. That part about Pakistani soil being used by India against Pakistan and the Taliban would not allow that soil to be used against any other country, specifically Pakistan, turned out to be a big lie, because India was obviously not using Afghan soil against Pakistan, because India has been gone for almost a year now. It's almost a year. In the next 10 odd days, it will be 1 year since Taliban stormed to power. And Taliban has done nothing, not even a verbal condemnation of what the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is doing to Pakistani state and the Pakistani military. That's number one. Number two, this entire thing about Iran. India is trying to mainstream Iran. And I will tell you why. Now, this may not come out of our foreign office, but the way India has been going about in building the North-South corridor. Now, this corridor originates in Russia. It originates in Russia, comes through via Iran, and comes all the way to India's western seaboard. A couple of shipments have already reached that way. Now, this gives India access to Europe. It gives India direct access to Russia. And it allows India to go to Central Asia without touching Pakistan or Afghanistan, which means that if India wants to actually touch Afghanistan, go inside Afghanistan, it can use the North-South corridor. If India wants to go to Central Asia, it can use the North-South corridor. In effect, what it has done is largely mainstream Iran. Now, this is a long haul. It's not going to happen overnight. If anybody thinks that Iran is going to be mainstreamed like that, that's not going to happen, but in due course, it will. There is also an estimate by people in India's Foreign Office that the Americans will be back in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was the route that Alexander the Great took. Afghanistan is the epicenter of the Great Game. Afghanistan has been central to global conflicts for the past 1,000 years. If the Americans come back to Afghanistan, let's say after 10, 15 years, they should not use the Pakistan link. They should not use Ben Qasim port. They should not use the Gwadar port. They should not use any Pakistani port at all. If at all they need to go to Afghanistan, they can use the North-South corridor. India is building infrastructure at a rapid rate. We've heard about the Chawar port. We've heard about the Zardan railway line. There are other roads and connectivities that are being built by India. So this is something that is very, very important. Now coming back to location. Pakistan thought that the world will come to its rescue. If you look at the decline of the Pakistani rupee, it had started happening 1.5, 2 years back. But after the Afghan Taliban stormed into Kabul, nobody in the world realized, except for a few think tanks working out of New Delhi and Washington, nobody else was talking about it. Nobody else was even saying for a moment that the Taliban coming to power in Kabul will directly impact the Pakistani rupee. Now, this is a job for crystal gazers, people who are analysts, who like to look at the world as a jigsaw puzzle and then slowly put it together. Now, what happened was America lost interest. America left overnight. And when America left, the dollars that had been coming since the time of Seato and Cento, that had come during the first Afghan Jihad, when Russia, between 1979 and 1989, when Russia was in Afghanistan, or for the past 20 years, the war on terror after 9/11, when America was in Afghanistan, those containers full of dollars which would land at Ben Qasim port in Karachi and then be transported inside to Islamabad. They say that there is a joke in Pakistan, and they say that whenever America gives aid to Pakistan, whenever there are dollars flowing, or whenever America gives any sort of help, when Saudi Arabia, when China, when the UAE gives Pakistan aid or loans, the property prices in London and Dubai go up. That is the level of corruption of Pakistan. So what has happened in the recent past is those dollars have dried up. Today, as I speak to you, the Pakistani rupee is trading 250 to the US dollar. This basically does not mean that if you go with 250 rupees to the market, you will get $1. Because even there in the Pakistani open market, the dollar is selling at a premium of 15 to 20 rupees per dollar. The absolute flight of the dollar and the collapse of state institutions is something that has boxed Pakistan into the corner, and today Pakistan is unable, absolutely, to take advantage of its geopolitical location, the geopolitical rent, as I would like to put it. The United States of America gave money to Pakistan for two reasons. Number one, because it wanted to. Those were earlier days of the romance between Pakistan and the United States of America. And number two, it gave money to Pakistan because it had to. What actually happened was, when America wanted, as I mentioned earlier, when it wanted to enter Afghanistan, or when it wanted a counterweight in that region, America gave money to Pakistan. Pakistan was flush with US dollars. Pakistan's entire nuclear weapons program was because America chose to look the other way. Today, America has other concerns. And its primary concern is, what if Pakistan is run over by the Taliban? What if Pakistan is run over by radical Islamists? When I talk with Pakistani strategists, when I talk with Pakistani journalists, they always say that the Pakistani army is a professional army, and there is no way this can happen. There is no way that Pakistani nukes can fall into Taliban hands or the hands of radical Islamists. But that is not the point. That is not the point. The point is that the Pakistani military itself is so radicalized. There are people within the military who support Al-Qaeda. There are people within the military who support the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the same organization that is killing Pakistani military personnel. There are people within the Pakistani military who support the Afghan Taliban. So whether the Pakistani nuclear assets fall into the Taliban hands or not is hardly the matter, is hardly a point of discussion. The point is that they are already into the hands of a highly Talibanized Pakistan army. Now, today America is afraid that Pakistani nuclear assets can be controlled by China. This fear is not misplaced. Pakistan itself, and let me tell you other things that are happening in Pakistan vis-a-vis China. Earlier we had this worry that there would be China to the east, and I'm talking from an Indian point of view, China to the east and Pakistan to the west. That was the initial fear. Two nuclear armed countries with which we have fought wars. Now the problem is China to the east and China to the west, because Pakistan, for all practical purposes, behaves like a colony of China. Pakistan does what China itself cannot do. What China cannot do overtly, Pakistan does covertly. So, with the China-Pakistan economic corridor having stalled, there are talks about how China and Pakistan want a third party involved in it. Geographically speaking, this could be Afghanistan. Nothing else makes sense. China has also signed MOUs worth $400 billion with Iran. Now, it is okay in the field of geopolitics for a nation to have multiple friends and partners. That is how it rolls. But China was depending upon Pakistan to guarantee security inside Afghanistan. And I want to make it easy for you to understand, so you understand what game China is playing. Now, Pakistan obviously has nothing to sell. There are no great brands coming from Pakistan. Pakistan has no technology. Pakistan has no manufacturing base. In fact, surprisingly, Pakistan, which is 60% to 70% agrarian, is a net importer of food grain. That is how bad Pakistan's economic state is. But the fact of the matter is, this is the last push for Pakistan to sell itself geopolitically. After having mortgaged its airports, after having mortgaged its highways, its superhighways, its institutions, after selling off percentages of its government-owned companies to UAE, now this is the next big plan to raise money. What Pakistan does in this case, if this comes to fruition and this actually happens, what Pakistan does is ensure the security of China inside Afghanistan. China is never going to put military personnel, Chinese military personnel inside Afghanistan. China does not do that. China attacks with a checkbook. Now, if the China-Pakistan economic corridor has to enter Afghanistan, there has to be someone who can assure the Chinese that their workers, their engineers will be safe inside Afghanistan. Now, the Afghan Taliban cannot do that. The Afghan Taliban, as I mentioned so many times before on television and on various other programs, is that the Taliban is not a homogeneous construct. It is an affiliation of various warlords who come under this umbrella organization called the Afghan Taliban. And this is exactly what China fears. There is another Chinese fear, that the Pakistanis have not been able to assure and guarantee security for Chinese people inside Pakistan. There have been over a dozen Chinese engineers and teachers who have been killed inside Pakistan. If Pakistani army cannot guarantee security of Chinese inside Pakistan, how can the Pakistani army guarantee security of Chinese inside Afghanistan? But this is exactly something that Pakistan has promised China. So China comes possibly using the Wakhan corridor or possibly using the current infrastructure inside Pakistan to branch off inside Afghanistan and reach Iran. This is another of China's plans. Frankly, China does not have too much of patience with Pakistan. China is losing patience very, very fast. China also feels that Pakistan has let down China. There have been talks and there have been accusations of pilfering of almost 20 to 25 billion US dollars of Chinese money by various Pakistani politicians and generals. So my friends, as I mentioned before, there was a time when America gave money to Pakistan for various projects, for various services rendered. And then America slowly and slowly started moving away from Pakistan, and there were these huge cries of, that we've been betrayed. The Pakistanis felt that they had been betrayed by the Americans. And this is exactly where China stepped in. Flush with new money and a newly found confidence in its economy, China started investing very heavily inside Pakistan. I've just mentioned the China-Pakistan economic corridor. It was not as much a commercial enterprise as it was a strategic enterprise. Commercially, the China-Pakistan economic corridor does not make sense, at least for the Pakistanis. Because even if $45 billion that the Chinese claim have been invested in Pakistan, there are no jobs to show for it. There are no industries to show for it. And today, Pakistan is seen begging for $1.5 billion of loan from the IMF. I mean, $45 billion is not small change. It is not loose change. And it would have had an impact on any country's economy. But it had zero impact on the economy of Pakistan. And China was actually thinking the opposite. China thought that something will come out of it, and nothing came out of it. So, America out, China in. Now, the next step was that most of the Pakistani generals have been trained in America. Their children study in America. They have properties in America, or the Western world for that matter. Europe, especially London, in Canada, in Toronto. In such cities, Pakistani generals have their children settled there, their wives there. They have foreign nationalities. Now, you see, no Pakistani generals' children are studying in Beijing. They don't have property in Beijing or in any Chinese city. Everything is invested abroad. And the Americans have known this for a very, very long time. The American State Department is on record saying that they've been backstabbed and betrayed by the Pakistanis. This is pretty much what Hillary Clinton said when she came to Pakistan, and then the Pakistanis were saying that, you're giving us money, but you've put too many terms and conditions. They said that to Hillary Clinton, and she snapped back saying that you don't have to take the money. You can say no. And the Pakistanis didn't have any response to that. They didn't have any answer to that. Coming back to my point about how the focus shifted, America's focus shifted. Donald Trump said no to war. He said, I'm going to be the first American president to pull out American troops, whether from Iraq or from Afghanistan, and he did just that. And when Joe Biden came into the picture, he followed through somewhat with this policy. And Joe Biden said that if there is any country of interest to the United States of America, it is India. I think it is not just strategically or geopolitically. Even at an emotional level, America had had enough of Pakistan, of Pakistani doublespeak, of Pakistani betrayal. And of course, of the Pakistanis constantly asking the Americans for money. Now, here are 4 countries who give Pakistan money. There is China, there is America, still through the IMF and other agencies. Then there is Saudi Arabia, and there is the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. These are the 4 countries or nations or groups of nations on which the existence of Pakistan depends. Lately, what China and Saudi Arabia have said is that, yes, we will give you money, provided you first get a loan from IMF. Because both of them believe that the IMF will do its own due diligence, and then giving Pakistan money would be safer. The truth is that the guarantors of Pakistan's security, the guarantors of Pakistan's sovereignty and economic well-being, these 4 countries that I mentioned have had enough of Pakistan. And this is something that is pinching Pakistan. You can say that the Pakistani elite, the political parties in Pakistan, are following a scorched earth policy. And no country is willing to invest in a country that is so politically unstable. Even IMF, who, as a matter of duty, comes to the rescue of nation states that are economically unstable or going bankrupt, has pulled its hand away because it does not see Pakistan going anywhere. There is no political stability or economic stability one can understand. The IMF usually deals with countries and nation states that are economically unstable. But there should be a modicum of political stability. With the kind of sound bites that are coming out of Pakistan, it's enough to scare everybody, including the IMF. So nobody wants to touch Pakistan as of now. So what is the future for Pakistan? Pakistan needs to recalibrate its strategies. Pakistan needs to understand that those days of getting money from America and from the rest of the world, the days of blackmailing the world, that, we will become unstable, we have nuclear weapons, those days are gone. Pakistan has not delivered on its promise. What Pakistan wants is countries around the world, financial institutions to keep giving Pakistan money after money without any accountability. Pakistan has no hope or plan of returning those monies to the people who gave them the money in the first place. But this is what Pakistan wants, that China, Saudi Arabia, America, and when I say America, I also mean the World Bank and IMF-like institutions, and of course, the United Arab Emirates, to keep signing check after check and keep Pakistan afloat. Now, that is unlikely to happen in the future. The world has moved on to the Indo-Pacific. America has found a new partner in India, and that partner, India, is not dependent upon America, and this is exactly what America likes right now. India does not go with a begging bowl to America and other countries asking for funds. India does not threaten the world. India is a responsible nuclear weapon state. This suits America just fine. It also suits India, and it suits the rest of the world. This has led to increasing isolation of Pakistan, and the threats that have been coming out of Pakistan recently have become more and more bizarre. But in the end, like the CEO of that retail company told me, that what is important in retail is location, location, and location. This no longer holds true of Pakistan, because Pakistan's days of exacting a geopolitical rent from the rest of the world are clearly over. Thank you for watching Checkmate. I'll catch you next week. Till then, have a great weekend.